Good morning. And it's a real pleasure being here. I think it's a pleasure being here. And yes, I was reminded that when I agreed to this very kind invitation, I did say I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Having said that, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on nuclear reactors. So if you have any of those questions, I will very easily redirect them to the experts that are also here. And I just had a little bit of a flashback, because the last time that I was here over a year ago, I did accept as well, because it's my style, to have a Q&A session, and it was all about the net zero framework. I hope that this time it actually goes better than that one. The discussions that you will have today just demonstrate further that decision that is not only part of the IMO goals of decarbonize and look for a more sustainable future. It's a global decision. Now, for this session today in particular, we're talking about maritime and the energy sector. And this is when nuclear starts playing a part. Something that has been very clear from the moment that we started talking about decarbonizing shipping and enhancing the efficiency of the vessels is that we couldn't do that alone. Shipping cannot decarbonize on its own. We do rely on new technologies, new fuels, and this comes primarily from the energy sector. And this is when nuclear is also playing its part. The reason that I say that is when we started back in 2011 with the Energy Efficiency Design Index, we saw the pathway towards new designs, new vessels, new ways of operations. And we agree that we needed every single opportunity to take on board those measures that will take us to be greener and more sustainable. And that's when we decided to be technology and fuel agnostics. And we have maintained that from the very beginning. Our course at IMO will not change. Our main goal is always to aim for safe, secure, and environmentally sound shipping. And of course, every opportunity that we'll see that would allow us to get there, maintaining those three principles, we will embark on them. Back in 2023, we took the next steps, which is what is guiding us to the next set of actions that we're preparing to adopt. And it was to reach decarbonization in the sector by or around 2050. Quite an ambitious goal. But we knew back then that we have already taken the necessary steps and built the foundations for us to be able to achieve. It's going to be a challenging one. We know that. But we're used to facing those challenges in several aspects of shipping, from safety, liability, security, and including the environment. So back in 2023, the time frame was quite ambitious to set up technical and economic measures in 2 years, for them to enter into force in 16 months afterwards, and then immediately start looking at measuring how we will achieve the goals, first to reduce emissions by 20%, aiming at 30% by 2030, and an uptake of alternative fuels by 5%, aiming at 10% equally by 2030. But I'm sure that you are familiar with what happened last October. We didn't get to adopt the framework that we had on the table in relation to technical and operational measures. Some will call it a failure. I don't operate that way. We still have work to do. What we learned from those discussions is, first of all, reiterating this, that we cannot work in isolation. These are not decisions that are only part of the shipping sector. We need to engage better with the energy sector, the environmental administrations, and even foreign affairs. Also, the recognition that the state of the world, geopolitically, is not what it was back in 2023 when we adopted the strategy. And we've seen the shift around the world in relation to how this global agenda that we all recognize its importance of decarbonizing and looking for cleaner sources of energies has increasing challenges. But it hasn't slowed the progress of IMO. Just last April, we met again at the Marine Environment Protection Committee, and we agreed on the next steps forward to address some of the concerns in relation to how the new technologies will be embraced by the framework, how existing transitional fuels like liquefied natural gas can also play a part in this transition, how any revenues that may be collected, it's going to be distributed within the sector in order to support the goals that we have set up. And the membership has agreed to a set of meetings starting in September and then following in November to actually take the next steps. And that is what is going to take us forward in the way that we still have the goal to achieve the decarbonization by around 2050. Then it's the aspects of the alternative fuels, or let me put it this way, the fuels. Because for us, when we're looking at this technological development, we look at the fuels as the source of energy. And this is where nuclear comes in. We started with the life cycle assessment, and in the recent discussions this year, there was a lot of interest on nuclear propulsion, whether it's going to be nuclear propulsion that will support shipping from the shore, support the port's infrastructure as well, and the provider of this clean energy, or is it going to be on board the vessels? Now, we don't have the answer to that, but we're open to all the development, the technical aspects, the practicalities of how this can become a reality. And you already heard part of that just before me. And I'm sure that there will be more of that, not only today, but in the future. As we move in that respect, one of the core areas for IMO is safety. That's how the organization was founded, and it continues to be our main goal. It may not reach the levels of coverage in the media as the environmental meetings do, but trust me, we spend most of the time every year at IMO discussing safety, security, and the human element. And it's the reason why we're partnering with the International Atomic Energy Agency with the Atlas project that, as mentioned, is going to be launched in August. Because we need to review the safety code for nuclear vessels that was adopted back in 1981. We acknowledge that already. It is on the pipeline. And there's a lot of interest at IMO in how this work is going to progress, starting with the recognition or the introduction, the welcoming of one non-governmental organization, NINO, that is now representing and participating very actively at the meetings at IMO. And I'm sure and I encourage you to actually use that connection, that participation, to bring your experience and expertise to the very interesting discussions that we will be having in the future. We have already moved towards the next steps of decarbonization. We have adopted interim guidelines for the operations, the use of fuels like ammonia, hydrogen, and methanol on board the vessels as propulsion fuels. Nuclear is the next step. It's been discussed together with other renewable energy sources like solar, batteries, and wind. But I can tell you, the main focus of the discussions this year were actually on nuclear. It's how we're going to take that next step forward. And from your agenda today, you will be focusing not only on what is happening right now, technological development, but what also it's coming in the future. But here's where I'll have a plea for you. Whatever you do in relation to this transition, this transformation that we expect it will be happening in the not too distant future. Always remember the people, because we will need those seafarers to be trained in order to operate on board those vessels. And we always face these kind of challenges, that by the time that the vessels start to trade, there will not be enough of them to provide that experience to the seafarers to work on board them. So please start thinking ahead what kind of parameters you can bring to IMO so we can, in parallel, not only discuss the safety aspects of nuclear propulsion, but also the training requirements. And there's an additional one that I actually originally left out, but it was just mentioned. It's liability. We will need a liability convention. We're just working on one for autonomous vessels. And we're working on looking at the liability conventions for alternative fuels. So don't wait until the very end to bring these topics to IMO, to bring this experience, this expertise. Another point that I want to highlight that you have in the program, and it's towards the end of the day, it doesn't make it less important, is the approach in how we're going to deal with the public perception. Because it is a reality. Somehow, when we talk about nuclear, especially with what's happening right now, it's always linked to conflict, or tends to be linked to conflict. And that's not what we want. But the sooner we go out and demonstrate not only the benefits, but how we also address any safety concerns, the quicker that it will help us to bring civil society on board with us. And we're not starting from zero. When we were introducing liquefied natural gas as propulsion, many ports around the world were resisting and actually prohibiting for those ships to come in, because they consider them a ticking bomb. Nobody talks about them anymore. People actually like the way that those ships have been designed, and they rush to the port to take photos of them. So it's how we actually engage not only the people in the sector, not only those that know what we're talking about, but how we take it beyond to those that have a say, even from a different perspective and a point of view. And the last note from me, this is the 4th European Summit. In order for us at IMO to make the necessary progress, to take all the steps required for this global industry that deserves and requires global regulations, we need to bring everyone on board. The more you engage beyond one region, the better it is for us and for the effectiveness on the implementation of the IMO rules that will govern nuclear propulsion in commercial shipping. So I do invite you as well to engage with developing countries, those that want to be part of this process and this transition, that can benefit from it. And in that way, we really reiterate that shipping is global, and that when we look forward to decarbonize the sector to be more sustainable, we're doing it for the benefit of everybody in the planet. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll open the floor for comments. No, actually, you said no comments, no statement, only questions. There you go. So we'll do questions. Thank you very much. Now, I can't see because of the lights. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Erland Hagen from Traneberg in Norway. I want to ask you now, when there are so many discussions about how we can make nuclear legal in commercial maritime, obviously focusing on safety, probably number one. Emissions, of course, that is handled simply by adopting nuclear. But thinking about the long-term sustainability and resource management, there can be a different solution chosen based on if we want maximum theoretical safety versus that we also want to maintain long-term material and resource perspectives. Can IMO and IAEA consider such concerns, or do you only think about safety?
The quick answer is no. We focus a lot on safety because it tends to be one of the areas that sometimes get forgotten. And let's be honest, in order for us to actually continue to demonstrate that shipping meets the goals for which it was established for, which is to trade in a safe, secure, and environmentally sound manner, we still need to focus on safety. That's where we start. Now, it's the reason why we're actually partnering with IAEA, particularly with the Atlas project, because we cannot work in isolation. We will be looking into the sustainable aspects of nuclear propulsion, for example, when we discuss it at the level of the Marine Environmental Protection Committee. Equally, the ship design and equipment meetings at IMO are the ones looking into the technology itself and how it can be deployed. Then we have, at the same time, another meeting that focuses on the training requirements. They all connect with each other. What we're doing with IAEA is that the aspects of nuclear global regulations that go beyond the scope of IMO, particularly in the safety aspects, the inland that we don't regulate, where they can bring us that expertise. It's the main reason why we're working together, and this is where the Atlas projects bring us on board. We are not planning to delay any process. Engaging with them is just to work in parallel. By focusing on safety doesn't mean that we are not tackling the other aspects that I was mentioning from the decarbonization side, the technological development, as well as the training requirements or the liability conventions. But safety is one of those that sometimes doesn't get seen as we're working on, but is the one that is focusing on the code that we developed back in 1981. And that's where we need to start on the framework that we already have in place to modernize it, to bring it up to date, to speed, and will actually guide us in other parts of work of the organization.
Thank you. Virginia Crosby. Virginia Crosby, MD of NEMO. Thank you very much for your presentation. You touched on Atlas, and my question relates to, from the perspective of the IMO, how significant will Atlas be to you in moving from ambition to delivery in the maritime nuclear sector? Thank you.
You see, I want to answer that question without sounding... I'm waiting to hear more about the full scope of Atlas. That's what I'm actually welcoming right now, the launch of the project in August. The reason why I say that is because we are progressing our work at IMO up to a certain extent right now, until we have more information of the full scope of Atlas, which is going to be driven by IAEA. We've been participating on the preparatory programs in relation to our work on ship design and equipment regulations, as well as the safety requirements in relation to the existing nuclear code of IMO. Once it is launched, what we look forward to is to keep a work in parallel. So as the Atlas projects moves forward in relation to allowing this development of nuclear propulsion that can be utilized for commercial shipping, we will be up to speed with any amendments, any new instruments, any guidance that need to be developed at IMO. Is the reason why we will be there in August, the reason why we will continue to engage with our team directly with the Atlas project, and is actually reporting at every meeting of the Maritime Safety Committee, which means 3 times every biennium. And in that way, we know that there will be a parallel approach rather than us going in one direction and then probably waiting to see what happens. It allows us also to drive part of the Atlas projects by any information, any questions that anyone, including NEMO, may bring to IMO. We can then immediately pass it on to the IAEA and ask them to address it if we consider it is outside our scope.
Stand as well. Hello, I'm Ronan Cloud from Copper. We work in communications. I'm wondering from the public perception, given some of the technology is quite a long way off, should we still start communicating with the public now to bring them on the journey, or do you think wait until things are a bit more built and together?
This is a very personal response from my side. I will say now, because we will tackling the younger generation, the ones that are actually going to be doing all the work later on in the future. So the sooner we actually start educating them, the more that we also will bring them on board, attract them to the sector, attract them to all these amazing developments that we're bringing forward for their own benefit. And at the same time, we actually start changing the negative perception that nuclear may have because of some of the geopolitical situations that we are ongoing, that we are experiencing right now. So I don't see any reason why we need to wait.
It's okay, what? Just keep going.
Hi there, Declan from Lloyd's List. You mentioned the need for a new liability convention by IMO. How long does a new convention take to be hashed out, agreed, and enter into force? And then how is that timeline compatible with member states' strategy to reach net zero by or around 2050?
You can tell that he's been to IMO meetings before. Liability conventions, off the top of my head, we move towards a number of countries that ratify rather than specifically making references to the tonnage requirements. But but we need to look into what will be the case there. Now, another area that we can look into it is whether we can accommodate those liability requirements within existing conventions. So if you move into a new instrument, it can take 2-3 years, for example, on a very ambitious timeline, and I know you're taking notes now, 2 to 3 years for the development. Then, of course, by the time that we finalize, it's another 1.5 years for the period for approval and adoption. This is very boring for several of you. Approval and adoption, and then of course, I can't tell you on the entry into force. We always campaign and look forward to the entry into force as soon as possible. But other mechanisms that we have, which we are going to analyze, in particularly with the alternative fuels that we have already upcoming for the market, is how they fit into existing liability conventions, use tacit amendment procedures, and then in that way, we can actually have the regulatory framework in parallel with the implementations of the technologies of the new fuels. So it's 2 answers. The first one, I can't really be specific. It's just the normal time frame, but it will then depend on ratifications. The second one is actually a faster approach that can go in parallel in line with the development of, if I take nuclear, as we progress on the nuclears, we start looking immediately into the liability aspects, and we can finalize at the same time.
Sounds easy.
Well, it's easy. We sometimes complicate it, but it's not difficult. We have a lot of experience on that.
What's
Oh, not quick.
last one?
Hello, Kaan Yalman here from Car Power Ship. I just want to ask a question from a seafarer perspective, to be honest. So nowadays we are seeing a lot of geopolitical tensions all around the world, especially with the Hormuz, and countries seem to, hit the vessels these days. And from an IMO perspective, what would you think, how this will affect the framework, the security of the ship, security of the nuclear propulsion?
Okay, that's a tough question. can't predict what's going to happen in the future. We're seeing how, regrettably, geopolitics continues to affect shipping and at the same time affects everybody else, even those that are not involved in any conflict. But whenever we looked into new fuels, new technologies, and nuclear is not the exception, of course, we will have to look into what are those safety requirements and security requirements that will be paramount for any operations and any aspects. If there is a situation of conflict, similar to what we're doing right now with the Strait of Hormuz, is don't take any risks. And this is part of the education to ship owners, ship operators, anyone working in that part of the sector, not to put seafarers at risk, not to put the vessels and the environment at risk, so we don't take them into these regions. As I said before, we can be resilient, we can find new routes of operations and avoid those hot spots or high-risk areas. Always our main concern is the seafarers. What we cannot do is then transport the goods that are required for those countries in the regions, or the goods that actually are exported from those countries for the benefits of everyone else and from their economy. But we'd always put the safety of the seafarers first and the safety of the vessels, of course. So this is for us one of those learning curves into, as geopolitics continue to impact shipping as collateral for all this conflict, is what additional safety guarantees we'll be able to put, probably in the operational aspects in particular. Is that all right? Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.